Close your eyes for a second and think about Britain in the 1990s. The school run, the supermarket car park on a Saturday morning, the motorway on a bank holiday weekend. There was a certain kind of car filling every single one of those moments. Not flashy, not exotic, just everywhere. And if you grew up in Britain during that decade, these cars were basically part of the scenery. Today, we are counting down the 10 British cars that absolutely dominated the roads of the 1990s. And trust me, by the time we get to number 1, you will not believe how many memories come flooding back. Also, make sure you subscribe so you never miss a trip down memory lane with Britain Rewind. Let us get into it. Number 10. Vauxhall Cavalier. The Vauxhall Cavalier. Now here is a car that most people under 30 have completely forgotten about, and that is honestly a shame. But here is the interesting part. In the early 1990s, this car was absolutely everywhere. Every business park, every company car fleet, every dual carriageway. The Cavalier was the go-to choice for middle managers, sales representatives, and family men across the whole country. It was practical, it was reliable, and it was just the right size for everything British life demanded. You would spot it in four-door saloon form or as an estate loaded up for a family holiday. What made this car truly everywhere was something else though. It was one of the most popular fleet vehicles in Britain for years running. Businesses bought it in bulk. That meant it showed up on every road, every day, without fail. Do you remember seeing a Cavalier parked on your street? Because there was almost certainly one there. This was not just a car. It was part of the working fabric of Britain. Number 9. Rover 400. The Rover 400 might not be the first name that jumps to mind, but the moment you see one, it all comes back. This was Rover's bread-and-butter family saloon and hatchback, built right here in Britain at Longbridge in Birmingham. And it was genuinely well loved. But here is something most people forget. The Rover 400 was actually built on a platform shared with Honda, which gave it a mechanical reliability that its badge alone never quite got credit for. It sat in driveways across the country, was a fixture in school car parks, and turned up constantly in rental fleets. The interior had that classic Rover feel, wood trim, soft seats, a sense of quiet dignity that felt very British indeed. You rarely see these now, and when you do, it stops you for a second. Was this parked on your street too? Because it was definitely parked on ours. Number 8. Ford Mondeo. Ford Mondeo. Even the name sounds like the 1990s. This car arrived in 1993 and almost immediately became one of the defining vehicles of the decade. But here is where it gets even more familiar. The Mondeo was not just popular, it was culturally embedded. Politicians drove them. Taxi drivers swore by them. Sales representatives put hundreds of thousands of miles on them without complaint. It became so common that the phrase of Mondeo man was actually used by politicians to describe the average British voter. Think about that for a moment. A car so widespread that it became a political demographic. It came as a hatchback, a saloon, and an estate, which meant there was a version for absolutely everyone. The estate version in particular was a motorway staple, loaded up with luggage, kids in the back, heading somewhere on a Friday evening. And one reason behind its success might surprise you, it was simply one of the best-built Fords of its era. Number 7. Nissan Micra. Now you might raise an eyebrow at Nissan appearing on a British cars list, but here is the thing, the Nissan Micro of the 1990s was built in Washington, Sunderland, right in the heart of the northeast of England. That makes it as British in production as almost anything else on this list. And this is where it gets even more familiar. The Micro was the car of choice for learner drivers, first-time buyers, and older drivers who just wanted something easy and dependable. It was tiny, it was light to drive, and it squeezed into parking spaces that left other cars sweating. You saw it everywhere near colleges, outside supermarkets, and tucked into narrow terrace street spaces. The second generation, launched in 1992, was particularly popular and went on to win European Car of the Year. Most people have forgotten how common this was. Would you still drive one today? Number 6. Vauxhall Vectra. The Vauxhall Vectra replaced the Cavalier in 1995 and stepped almost seamlessly into its predecessor's enormous shoes. And honestly, it did exactly what it was supposed to do. It became the reliable, sensible, utterly ubiquitous family car for the second half of the decade. But here is something about this car most people forget. The Vectra was one of the most complained about cars of its era in terms of styling, yet somehow it still sold in enormous numbers. People bought it not because it excited them, but because it was practical, spacious, and competitively priced. It was the car for people who needed a car without drama. Fleet buyers loved it. Families with children loved the boot space. And taxi firms across the Midlands and the North ran fleets of them without a second thought. At one point, this car was absolutely unavoidable on British roads. And this detail explains everything. Reliability sold it more than anything else. Number 5, Rover 200. Halfway through the list, and we have got to talk about the Rover 200. And if you are enjoying this trip down memory lane, do drop a comment below. We love hearing your memories on Britain Rewind. Now, the Rover 200 was something genuinely special in its time. It was a small, stylish, very British hatchback that punched above its weight in terms of interior quality. But here is the interesting part. Rover marketed it as a more premium alternative to the Ford Fiesta and Vauxhall Astra, and a surprising number of buyers agreed. You saw the Rover 200 everywhere, from shopping centre car parks to quiet suburban roads. It had a sense of quiet sophistication that other cars in its class simply did not offer. The wood trim, the soft leather options, the overall refinement, it felt like something more expensive than it actually was. This was not just a car. It was a little piece of British pride on four wheels. Number 4, Ford car. The Ford car arrived in 1996 and immediately stood out from everything around it. While the rest of the country was driving sensible boxes, the car turned up looking like it had come from the future. That curvy, bubble-shaped design was unlike anything else on British roads. But here is where it gets even more familiar. The car became the default first car for an entire generation of young British drivers in the late 1990s. It was cheap to insure, cheap to run, and just about big enough for 2 people and a weekly shop. You saw them in every college car park, outside every city centre flat, and crammed into the tightest urban spaces imaginable. And one reason behind its success might surprise you: it used the aging Fiesta platform underneath, keeping production costs low and reliability reassuringly predictable. It blended into city life completely. And that is exactly why it mattered so much. Number 3, Vauxhall Astra. The Vauxhall Astra. This is where the numbers start to get serious. The Astra was not just popular in the 1990s, it was a permanent fixture of British life in a way that few cars have ever managed. School runs, supermarket trips, motorway journeys, weekend drives, the Astra was there for all of it, in every corner of the country. But here is something most people forget. The Astra was available in an almost overwhelming number of body styles during this period. Hatchback, saloon, estate, convertible, van. There was literally an Astra for every purpose. That flexibility is a huge part of why it showed up absolutely everywhere. It was the car you saw in your neighbor's driveway, in the company car park, and queuing outside the school gate every single afternoon. You rarely see the 1990s versions now, and when you do, it hits differently. Was there an Astra on your road growing up? Number 2, Ford Escort. We are almost at number 1, and before we get there, let us give the Ford Escort the respect it absolutely deserves. The Escort was one of the most important cars in British automotive history, and in the 1990s it was still fighting hard at the very top of the sales charts. But here is the interesting part: the Escort had already been a British favourite for decades before the 1990s even started, and yet it still felt relevant, still felt familiar, still felt like it belonged. You saw it in taxi ranks across northern England, parked outside every terraced house, loaded up as an estate for family holidays to the coast. The driving school version was practically a national institution. What made this car truly everywhere was something else. It carried an entire generation of new British drivers through their first nervous miles on the road. This car was a rite of passage. And that is not something every car can say. Number 1, Ford Fiesta. And here it is. The car that was quite literally everywhere in 1990s Britain. The Ford Fiesta. If you grew up in Britain during this decade, the Fiesta was not just a car you saw, it was the car you grew up around. It was Britain's best-selling car for the majority of the 1990s, and that is not a coincidence. It was affordable, it was easy to drive, it was cheap to run, and it came in enough colors and trim levels to suit absolutely everyone. First cars, Mum's car, the one parked outside the chip shop, the one squeezed into the tight space at the supermarket, it was all the Fiesta. And one reason behind its success might surprise you: Ford kept improving it quietly and consistently, so each version felt just modern enough to keep buyers coming back. You rarely think about how many Fiestas you walked past every single day back then. But now that we have said it, you can't unsee it. And there you have it, 10 cars that did not just sell well, they shaped what British roads looked like for an entire decade. These were not dream cars. They were not weekend toys. They were the cars that got Britain to work, to school, to the shops, and back home again. And somehow, in doing all of that quietly and reliably, they became the cars we remember most. Which one stands out for you? Was there a car on this list that was sitting on your driveway or your parents' driveway back in the day? Let us know in the comments below. We genuinely love reading every single one. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to Britain Rewind. We have got plenty more nostalgic British content coming your way. See you in the next one.